a few more are joining, but we'll get the show on the road, so to speak. A very warm welcome to you all, and good afternoon from this side of Australia, and good evening to our guest who's dialing in from the USA. We're running now the third and final session of our Healthiest You series, which is run in partnership between the ACBC Victoria, Swiss, and the Australia-China Health Accelerator. And I want to thank all of you who've been following this series, hear from the experts on how we can best take care of ourselves during this once-in-a-lifetime COVID experience. Today we're ending on a very high note with two world-renowned speakers on integrative medicine. First and foremost, we have Professor Kylie O'Brien. Kylie is an adjunct professor at Torrens University, while holding roles as Director of Education, Australasian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine, and Director of Research and Education at the Australasian College of Cannabinoid Medicine. She's also an expert in the field of Chinese medicine, having been responsible for the development of 3 Chinese medicine master's degree curricula at both Western Sydney University and RMIT University here in Melbourne. She remains an active researcher supervising postgraduate students. Our second speaker, who we're very lucky to have zooming in from the USA, is John Easterling. John is an American businessman and environmentalist who is also known as the husband of our famous, fabulous singer-songwriter, Olivia Newton-John. John is a proponent of medicinal cannabis, having co-founded his company, Amazon Herb Company, to develop and market health and benefits of cannabinoids with botanicals. I'd like to remind you that this event is being recorded, and we will include a Q&A portion with our expert speakers. So please just type any questions you have during the session in the Q&A box, which is in the bottom of your screen. So now, with great thanks, I will pass over to Justin Howden, the Head of Government and Regulatory Affairs at Swiss, who has been a greatly appreciated supporter of this series. So Justin, over to you for a few words.
Thanks very much, Virginia. Also, thanks to Maddie for your great arrangements in making all this happen so seamlessly. It's fantastic to be able to support it. And the rest of the team today, and also Jason Sun, the co-supporter of the whole series. Thanks all for joining us. I'd like to welcome and acknowledge any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people joining our webcast today, on whichever lands they may be. H&H is really delighted to partner with the Australia-China Business Council on this event and the series, because it's directly linked to one of our 3 guiding words, nutrition. Others are mindset and movement, but nutrition is a critical part of our whole business model. H&H stands for health and happiness, which reflects our mission to try and make millions of people healthier and happier every day. We're well known here for the Swiss supplements range and skincare range, and also more recently for Biostime infant formula. We strongly believe that partnerships with suppliers, partnerships with people in our supply chain, academia, are very important and help build resilient and ethical value chains that can help nourish our natural resources and people along the way. Partnerships like that with ACBC and bring like-minded organisations and people together like today, not just to pollinate ideas, but also to help make things happen. In the Healthiest You series, which Virginia's talked about, provides valuable advice on how to improve day-to-day lifestyle through preventative measures, a healthier lifestyle, and where to go to seek help if you need it. It's great to see Kylie again today. Lovely to meet you for the first time today, John, and we're really looking forward to hearing from both of you. Back to you. Thanks, Virginia.
All right. So without further ado, Kylie, I would love you to take over the screen and give us your wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to bear with me. I'll share my screen and start from the beginning. Now we should have the full screen now. All right, so just a couple of declarations is that I work as Director for Research and Education for Relief Clinics, which is a group of integrative medicine clinics in Australia. I have conducted consultancy for many medicinal cannabis companies over the past 2 to 3 years, and I do own some shares in them. So here's really what I'm going to cover in today's talk. So let's just start with looking at what is integrative medicine. So I define it as combining Western medicine with the best evidence-based complementary medicine therapies and lifestyle interventions for not only the treatment but also the prevention of disease. And importantly, it will help empower the patient to be proactive in changing their health. So we do know that the prevalence of complementary medicine use is fairly high across the world. It can vary from anywhere from sort of 5% in some countries up to 75%. And even in our own country, Australia, we are high users of complementary medicine, with almost 70% of the population being shown to use some form of complementary medicine. Now, what I think is important about integrative medicine, and this is where I draw on my background in Chinese medicine, is that it looks at the root cause. We call that the bin in Chinese medicine, as well as the symptoms and signs that are manifesting, or the branches. So it's kind of a tree analogy, if you like, looking at the roots and the tree branches. So what do we need to integrate? Well, ACNM, where I work as Director of Education, we have 4 key pillars of health that we look at throughout our education programs. These are nutrition and diet, sleep, physical activity, and environmental factors that we believe need to be integrated with the best of Western medicine, because these really are at the root cause of a lot of illness. Now, I'm going to give an example of cancer, but I could have chosen any disease. I wrote a book on integrative oncology a couple of years ago with Professor Avni Sali, and so I'm drawing on, I guess, the research that I did for that book. Now, we know from research, and there's a lot of research about the importance of diet and nutrition for people with cancer. So it's estimated that up to 35% of cancer-related deaths can be linked to diet. And we know when people from, for example, Asian countries, where they've got lower rates of certain cancers like breast cancer and prostate cancer, migrate to Western countries and start to take up the diet of those countries, their cancer rates go up as well. The good news is we've got protective effects of diets that are high in vegetables and fruits against cancer, as well as preventing their recurrence. So here's some of the studies. High vegetables are associated with reduced risk of prostate cancer. High fruit and vegetable intake is associated with a greater recurrence-free survival in women with breast cancer. And they did a study in Iowa on 42,000 middle-aged women, and they found that the consumption of all vegetables and fibre was inversely associated with colorectal cancer. So they got a 27% reduction in risk in the highest intake group compared to the lowest. And of course, we know that diet's very important for our microbiome of our gut. And the gut microbiome does play a key role in the cancer pathway, and is also critical in immune functioning. So that's for any condition. So we want to make sure that the gut microbiome is a happy one. So it can influence inflammation. It can also influence our nervous system. We know that obesity is associated with gut dysbiosis. We know some cancers are associated with particular bacteria like gastric cancer and H. pylori. And we know that colorectal cancer is associated with an overall decreased microbial diversity and increases in particular bacteria as well. And finally, the microbiome of our gut links with our brain. It's called the gut-brain axis. There's lots of books written on this, and that modulates our emotions and moods. So we need to keep our gut very happy. The sleep is so important for all our bodily functions. For example, it helps regulate our hunger and appetite, newly formed memories, cognition. It regulates hormones, regeneration of cells, DNA repair. They're all happening during our sleep. Also, you know, our regulation of weight, our mood and emotions, and lots more. Now, we do know in cancer the percentage of insomnia in patients is usually around 3 times the general rate in the population. And it affects up to 50% of cancer patients, sometimes more. Now, disruption, again, we pull on the research here, and it shows disruption and sleep loss are associated with increased risk of prostate cancer. longer duration of sleep can also be associated with colorectal cancer. So it's often the shorter sleep or the longer sleep that becomes problematic. And we know when we look at the cellular level that sleep affects cancer too. So it at night regulates different chemicals like interleukin-6, growth hormone, and melatonin, and cortisol, one of the stress hormones. And they've found that when you restrict sleep, you get increased numbers of these, levels of these inflammatory cytokines or chemicals in the body like interleukin-6 and tissue necrosis factor alpha. So that's just some of the reasons why we need to make sure that we get good sleep. Now, physical activity, sedentary behaviour and physical inactivity are no good for anything, really, because they increase our risk of dying from any condition, and they increase our risk of myocardial infarction or heart attack, and they're also an increased risk for cancer. But again, the good thing is you get physically active and you can reduce your risk of developing cancer. So there was one study that showed that high levels of physical activity significantly decreased the risks of up to 13 different cancers. Now, even after cancer diagnosis, engaging in physical activity is good because it reduces all-cause risk of death and cancer-specific death as well. We also know that during cancer treatment, it can help improve or preserve muscle mass. It can reduce the symptoms and side effects, not only of the cancer, but the treatment as well. And it can give great psychological benefits and improve quality of life. It also helps control our blood glucose in diabetes, and it's a great form of social therapy. And I guess that's really what's missing at the moment in our current lockdown situation in Australia. Finally, environmental factors, and I guess this is something that I haven't paid as much attention to until the last few years, when I realised that environmental factors are probably one of the biggest things that we need to take into account in the care of patients and in optimising. And we, as a much broader concept, I am talking about global environments, so our food supply and pesticides in our waters and our foods, air pollution, electromagnetic frequencies, what's happening with climate change, but I'm also talking about our home and office environments, the off-gassing of chemicals from carpets and paints, whether we've got moulds in our house, what cleaning products we use, and therefore the toxins that we might be exposing ourselves to. And then we're looking at our personal environment, so that's stress. How does that affect us? Whether we're sleeping well, physical activity, even toxins in our personal care products. And then we're zooming back inside the body, and we're looking at our immune function and the gut microbiome. So all those things are what we conceptualize as environmental factors, and they're very, very important. Just to give you some idea, this is a study, and this is back in 1982, but they do this study on an ongoing basis in the US. And they basically look at cadavers, and they look at the fat tissue in the cadavers, and they look at what chemicals are in there. And here's a list of these disruptive chemicals that are carcinogenic and toxic to our body. And they found, here's one of them, polychlorinated biphenyls, in more than 83% of the samples that they took, and a total of 20 toxic compounds in more than 76%. So these things are getting into our bodies and they're staying in our bodies, and this is a problem. So here's just an example. Personal care products have been found to have multiple chemicals in them, and exposure to one or more of these has been linked to endocrine disruption, cancer, reproductive harm, and impairment of child nerve development or neurodevelopment. If we look at bottled water, and goodness knows why we consume water in bottles when we should really just be going out and getting a good water filter instead. 38 pollutants were found in 10 brands of bottled water. That was a US study. So, this is why we need to look at our environmental medicine, environmental toxins, environmental factors, because again, we must look at the root cause of illness. The stress is another one. We talked about inner environment. So if we look at cancer, it's implicated in cancer initiation, progression and survival. So in breast cancer studies, for example, up to 45% of women with breast cancer have got combined anxiety and depression, and it's no wonder. And that can be related to other things like cancer-related fatigue. So they have done studies and they have found associations with depression, for example, and cancer progression and survival time. So again, stress is very important in most diseases, I'd say, not just cancer. And of course, looking at the cellular level, stress impacts on our immune system, our endocrine system, our gut microbiome, and our genes. So it is most important we address the stressors in our lives. This rather complicated picture here really just sums that up. This is mind-body medicine. Here's stress, and it impacts on the mind, and then it impacts on our nerve system. This is psychoneuro, nerve, immunology, our immune system. Psychoneuroendocrinology, it affects our endocrines, our hormones, our immunity. And these can then have flow-on effects, which can lead to things like diabetes and cardiovascular disease and impacting on cancer as well. So why integrative medicine? Well, I see health as a spectrum, and it's multi-dimensional. So it's illness prevention, it's illness treatment, but it's also health optimization. So in this picture here, yes, you've got someone down here, and this is at the lower end. This person is looking pretty ill. Then you've got these people here are looking a lot healthier, and then you've got this fantastic athlete up here in the corner. And again, what does integrative medicine do? It helps address those pillars of health, and it treats the bin and biao, the root cause of illness, as well as what's manifesting in the patient at that time. Now, why do we need to enable integrative medicine? And I'm talking about putting in place structures that help integrative medicine become a regular part of healthcare. And I think it's because we're really not doing that well currently. So if we look at this graph, which I've taken from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, dementia, including Alzheimer, has increased from 32.3 deaths per 100,000 people in 2009 to up to now 41.2 in 2018. I pulled some other figures just to say raw numbers. Deaths from intentional self-harm, 3,046 people killed themselves in 2018. Cancer, 23,000 back in 2009, 30,000 deaths in 2018. And as I said, I've just highlighted the ones that are related to cancer and that intentional self-harm, which really bothers me. So how do we put it into action? Now, integrative medicine can be a regular GP doing additional training in forms of nutritional environmental medicine or integrative medicine, and that's what ACNM does. It helps train doctors and other healthcare practitioners. But I think more importantly, it's a team approach. It's an integrated care model where you have teams of healthcare practitioners with their own expertise in different areas, working together with the patient, respecting the patient's right to choose the type of therapies that they want to experience to empower them on their health journey. And some examples of that in Melbourne, for example, at the National Institute of Integrative Medicine, which has been operating since, I think, around 2008, in Hawthorne, has about 30 integrative medicine practitioners all working together. And a new kid on the block is one that I've become associated with, Relief Clinics, which are popping up in Melbourne and soon to be other states around Australia and possibly also New Zealand. So here's some strategies. Have a broader understanding of what health means. Integrative medicine seeks to understand the root causes, which can be, as I said, the things that I've talked about. It has a focus on illness prevention as well as health optimization. So we shouldn't just be accepting of average health, whatever that means. We should want to have the best health that we can have. Importantly, it's empowering the patients to make their proactive choices and changes, and it respects their rights of choice as well. I think it's a team approach with GPs, specialists and allied healthcare practitioners all working together, because I think Western medicine works well with some of these different integrative therapies. And that's models that go along with this. So let's have a look at what is the relevance of nutritional medicine and botanicals and Chinese medicine in health. So all of these can address those 4 keys of pillars of health that I've been talking about, and they've all got their role to play in illness prevention by, for example, optimising our immune system functioning, and as integrative treatment of illness as well, working alongside Western medicine. Here's a few, I guess, examples I've pulled from the scientific literature. Here's good old vitamin C, and a meta-analysis is where you pull lots of randomised controlled trials together and you come up with basically a statistical result of does this work or not. So they looked at common cold duration, and it was reduced by 8% in adults and 14% in children who regularly took vitamin C. And in most studies, that was 1,000 milligram a day. But in the kids who took 1 to 2 gram a day, the cold duration was reduced by 18%. So that's quite significant. And they also found the severity of the colds was reduced by those who took supplements regularly too. Vitamin D seems to reduce the risk of asthma. So it certainly reduced the risk of severe asthma exacerbations rather, and these are often precipitated by viral upper respiratory tract infections. And it also was found to reduce hospitalisations due to asthma. So this study pulled together 7 randomised controlled trials in children and 2 in asthma, and this was a Cochrane review. And they basically said, look, vitamin D supplementation reduced the rate of exacerbations requiring systemic corticosteroids. So the rate ratio was 0.63. So that's around a 37% reduction. And it also decreased the risk of at least 1 exacerbation requiring a visit to an emergency medicine department or hospitalisation or both. So again, significant reductions there in this Cochrane systematic review. There's lots of evidence, and in fact, Professor Avani Saleh and I wrote a book on this a few years ago called The Clinician's Guide to Integrative Oncology. And we talked in our book about those many factors that I've just spoken about, but also we have a chapter on vitamins and other supplements. And there certainly is evidence in the literature that various supplements can be beneficial for cancer, protecting immunity. And I guess the premise overall is that a healthy person with cancer is going to do better than an unhealthy person. Now, again, in the literature, there's lots of research where they've actually been integrating supplements with chemotherapy, some very promising areas. For example, milk thistle reduces the toxicity associated with a number of chemotherapy drugs, and it also reduces the liver toxicity involved. IV, intravenous calcium and magnesium, reduced the toxicity associated with oxaliplatin. And vitamin E was found to potentiate, that means help, the effects of doxorubicin on apoptosis. Apoptosis is programmed cell death, and you want that with the cancer, because in cancer you get that loss of programmed cell death. They just keep multiplying. They don't die when they should. So, you know, this study is actually very good. It also showed, there's other studies that show the increased cytotoxic effects of paclitaxel in bladder cancer. So again, we're starting to see lots of research here where supplements can help with things like chemotherapy. Now, this is a study that was just been published. This is vitamin D and COVID-19. So it's only just hit the journals. It's a parallel randomised open label study in Cordoba in Spain. The basis of this study is that they think, well, activated vitamin D signalling may be beneficial in acute respiratory distress syndrome by decreasing what they call the cytokine or chemokine storm. So this is when you get inflammatory chemicals that get out of control, basically, and then they start to damage the lung and other body systems. So they looked at 76 patients that were hospitalised with COVID infection. Now, they all got the standard care, which is hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. Pardon me. 50 patients were also given high-dose vitamin D, and 26 controls didn't get that. Now, the results showed that of the vitamin D group, 2% of them required admission to the intensive care unit, so that was one person, and 50% of the control group were admitted to ICU. That's 13 out of those 26. In the vitamin D group, no one died. They all got discharged and they didn't have any complications on follow-up. Of the control group that were admitted to the ICU, 2 of those 13 patients died and 11 were discharged. So I think this is a very, very good research to come out now at a critical time where countries are still struggling and still really looking, I think, or should be looking for other ways to help combat. So why Chinese medicine? Well, I studied Chinese medicine years ago and I lived in Nanjing, China in 1999 and did an internship in one of the hospitals of Chinese medicine in Nanjing. So I've been in the Chinese medicine space for 20 years. Chinese medicine looks at humans holistically. It treats in an integrated way, and so do many forms of natural medicine. And we see running through Chinese medicine theories this concept of balance. So basically, where there is illness, there's a loss of balance somehow. And Chinese medicine seeks to restore it and addresses the bin, the root cause of illness, and the biao, the symptoms and signs that are manifesting in that person at the time. And it treats what they call the underlying pattern of disharmony. So each disease has several subcategories, if you like. These are called syndromes, and they are characterised by different signs and symptoms that are reflective of the etiology and pathogenesis understood in Chinese medicine theory. And the importance of that is that you're going to treat each pattern of disharmony quite differently with quite different Chinese herbs, Chinese herbal prescriptions, as well as acupuncture prescriptions also. So here's some integrative medicine strategies, and China integrates very well. It's business as usual over in China when they integrate Western medicine and Chinese medicine, as evidenced by a number of different things, including the number of integrative medicine hospitals that operate in China. And also the education system. If you're a Western medico, you are going to learn about Chinese medicine in your degree. If you're a Chinese medico training in China, you will certainly have a fairly heavy syllabus on biomedicine as well. So here's just a few of the studies. China's herbal medicine and chemotherapy, compound cushion injection. They found that the total relief from pain rate with the compound cushion plus chemo was better than chemo alone, and a lower damage called leukopenia. Xingwai-san is a commonly used formula, and it's used for many conditions, not just in this instance. But they found as an adjunct, it reduced the cardio or heart toxicity associated with chemotherapy. Jiawei-Shaoyao-san is again commonly used for many, many different conditions in Chinese medicine. When it was used with tamoxifen, it decreased the risk of subsequent endometrial cancer in women with breast cancer. It can also be used in cardiovascular disease. So they often use it in hospitals. They found that astragalus or huangqi injection helped reverse left ventricular remodeling. This is what happens after a heart attack, and improves the left ventricular function in patients with acute myocardial infarction. So the ventricle is just part of the left ventricle, is part of the heart. So how's China's herbal medicine being used in COVID-19? Well, very impressively, because I think China seems to have got on top of it and in record time. Amazing. And I noted at the start of the year the consensus statement from the Shanghai Medical Association talked about the combination of traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine for the treatment of new coronavirus pneumonia can improve the synergistic effect. And for adult patients, the condition can be improved through Chinese medicine syndrome differentiation. So that was what I was talking about, is to say what subcategory of this pneumonia does the patient have, and then target it appropriately with the right herbs. And the State Council Information Office of China, when they looked at nearly 74, or a bit over 74,000 confirmed COVID-19 patients, they found that 92% accepted both the combination of Chinese herbal medicine and Western medicine with a total effective rate of over 90%. This study on Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine was 54 patients with the coronavirus pneumonia in Wuhan. The mean patient age was around 55 years, and the mean stay was around 9 days. Now, they looked at what the blood tests after they discharged these people from hospitals, and they found significant improvements in a number of these blood markers here. And they think that China's herbal medicine may have assisted in the recovery. Now, they did something interesting here. They actually looked at the factors that affected the length of hospital stay, and that's a statistical analysis called multiple linear regression. The number one factor that they came up with that affected the length of hospital and stay in terms of reducing it was spleen and removing damp. Okay. What it means in Chinese medicine language is if I try to make a correlate of invigorating the spleen is really the digestive system in Chinese medicine. So here we are, we're looking at the gut microbiome. So I think this is really a corollary of improving the gut microbiome and improving immunity. It wasn't the herbs that relieve the toxicity category, and these would be herbs that would be targeting the virus. So it was really the key therapeutic focus for the treatment was on strengthening what we'll say is qi in Chinese medicine, but I'd say in Western medicine, we're talking about enhancing the immune function. So I think that's very interesting research in Chinese herbal medicine. Now, it's not just Chinese herbs. Western herbs have got a lot to offer. So here's just a couple of interesting herbs. Magnolia bark. It can help relieve anxiety. It reduces adrenaline, which of course we know is associated with stress. It helps promote sleep and much more. Whereas passion flower extract, also there's lots of research on its effect on stress. So for example, one 12-week study looked at stress resistance, and they found, and this was in patients suffering from nervous restlessness, and they found significant improvements in resilience and quality of life. And they found that the main values of all the symptoms that are accompanying, like sleep disturbance and exhaustion and fear and trembling and palpitations, they all improve significantly as well. So again, you know, if you look into the research literature, there's lots here, and you'll notice that these things are our pillars of health, aren't they? Sleep, stress, you know, anxiety. We want to make sure that we don't, you know, experience those as much as we can. So just a bit of background in China's medicine. It's a regulated profession here, and it has been nationally since 2012. And it was regulated since 2000 in Victoria. We have almost 5,000 Chinese medicos in this country now. We've got 3 divisions of the register. We've got a register which a division of acupuncture, a division of herbal medicine, and Chinese herbal medicine dispensary. And we've also got medical acupuncturists. So these are medical practitioners who have done courses in acupuncture. And unfortunately, I would have to say, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, acupuncture is covered under our national healthcare system, Medicare, but only if it's conducted by a Western medical practitioner. It's not if it's provided by a registered Chinese medicine acupuncturist. So I think that's a bit of an inequity that we might need changing. So let's have a look at some of the development opportunities in education. And there's lots of as I said, universities that are running bachelor degree programs in, you know, integrative medicine, naturopathy, Chinese medicine, that sort of thing. But I'm really going to focus on postgraduate education. And this is where I work a couple of days a week at the moment anyway, as Director of Education at the Australasian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine. And this organisation has been around for over 35 years, training doctors and increasingly allied health practitioners in nutritional and environmental medicine. So it's got practitioner courses, which are, that should be level 1, not level 4. But it has 2 levels to it. It has short courses for continuing professional development. It runs an annual conference. So this year with the COVID lockdown, we all had to jump online, and we had an 8-week conference with speakers from all around the globe talking on environmental disruptors and environmental medicine. It has an online library of webinars. So there are lots of opportunities for people involved in the education and health field in China and other places to partner with ACNM in terms of producing and increasing education for practitioners, healthcare practitioners around the globe on nutritional medicine. This is our conference, as I said, and it's still available. So for people who are interested in what is, environmental medicine and what you can do about it, and as an example of the quality of programs that we run, then you can have a look at that website. But the conference did take that broader concept of environment. There are other innovative training courses in Australia. We've got Nicole Belsma, has building biology, and she provides training in environmental health hazards in the home. She's written her book, Healthy Home, Healthy Families, I think it's called, and it's probably in its 5th print run now. So it's an amazing book. Mark Cohen is a professor of medicine who's retired now from academia, but he's set up his own business in terms of water and bathing and energetics. And he is running courses for people on the science of bathing as well as heat therapy. So these are very, as I said, cutting edge, innovative, evidence-based courses as well. And then the third one that I wanted to talk to you about, we actually have changed the name from Australasian to the International College of Cannabinoid Medicine, because this kind of education in medicinal cannabis will be going worldwide. And our mission here is to contribute to the scientific evidence base through education and through good quality research. So if you're interested in talking further about educational opportunities with the ICCM, feel free to contact me. Now, research. We have lots of universities doing bits and pieces of research in integrative medicine. I'm just going to highlight a few here. We've got the National Institute of Complementary Medicine Health Research Centre, NICM, and that is at Western Sydney University. So there's their new building that they've moved to this year. They've got a number of great researchers here. A friend of mine, Professor Chung Guang Li, is looking at mechanism of synergy of ingredients in natural products and functional foods. And that's one of the basis of why China's herbal medicine works, by the way. It's a synergy between the compounds that's most likely to be the reason that these things work. Jerome Saris, professor there, is looking at nutraceuticals and lifestyle modification for mood and anxiety disorders. Genevieve Steiner is looking at the area of cognitive impairment in dementia, and Carolyn E is looking at polycystic ovary syndrome. NIM in Melbourne, National Institute of Integrative Medicine, is active in research as well. They're doing lots of studies. They're doing one on gastric reflux, the gut relief study. They're doing things in hay fever, and a very interesting one by one of the PhD students there is looking at the outcomes of high-dose vitamin C after surgery, because and what happens with cognition with and without vitamin C. So Torrens University is a boutique university. It's located in Adelaide and Melbourne, and it's part of the Laureate. They have got their new strategy, and their 4 pillars are on health and sustainability. So they really are one of the universities I think are going to be leading the charge in sustainability education in the future. They're also looking at societies and drastic change and what's happening, you know, the new industrial revolution, if you like. So they're in Australia and New Zealand, as well as Africa and Nepal, and they are building research collaborations across the world. So the Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research, Professor Justin Bilby, if you're interested in contacting Torrens University, want to touch on some of the innovations and opportunities in nutritional and integrative medicine in Australia. I'm just really going to focus on 2. The first one is IM Gateway, Integrative Medicine Gateway. Now this has been running for a while. It's a drug-herb supplement interactions database that was developed by a Victorian company called Unity Health. And it's soon to have Chinese herbs in this as well. This was a project that I actually helped get up and running a couple of years ago, and have handed the research component over to Western Sydney University to do the research on the Chinese herbal side. But the University of Sydney is involved in the research that underpins what you get in the IM Gateway. So this is basically something, it's a practitioner resource, but it's soon to be a consumer resource, a consumer app. So you can basically put in the herb or the supplement or the drug class, and then it will populate these fields below with potential herbs that a drug might interact with, or supplements that a drug might interact with. And it talks about, it gives you a likelihood of interaction. It's like a traffic light system, if you like. And it also tells you what the level of evidence is. So I'm going to show you another screenshot in a moment. We tested this out with the Breast Cancer Network Australia last year. We actually ran a research project with them, actually it was 2 years ago, and it was published last year, where we looked at the usability of this IM Gateway in a group of consumers living with breast cancer. And that was to help refine this tool. But I think this is something that really could be adopted within hospitals and medical systems quite broadly, because we do know that a lot of people are using herbs and supplements. A lot of them don't tell the doctors about it, and the doctors really don't know what to do if they tell them about it. Of you listening in Australia and medical clinics, this could be the perfect tool for you to integrate in your systems. So this is really what it looks like to the practitioner. I've chosen valerian, and here I've said, whoops, look at that one. Here's a red, avoid the combination with alprazolam. And then you scroll down further, it will tell you what's the advice you can give to the patient, what's the evidence type. And there are different criteria to say, well, this is well-established evidence, which means it'll be based on randomized controlled trials, for example. This is the last one I want to talk about, and then John Easterling is going to continue on. This is a field that I've been pulled into 2 years ago, and I have never found a more fascinating herb in my life than medicinal cannabis. So I think there are a lot of opportunities. In Victoria, we have our industry development plan that many of you can look at online, and it's around medicinal cannabis as well as hemp seeds. So just a little bit of a lesson is that cannabis sativa is a plant for a start. There's over 750 chemicals in it that are probably responsible for its therapeutic effects. The main ones that we hear about are the phytocannabinoids, tetrahydrocannabinol and cannabidiol, CBD. But there's actually more than 120 of these phytocannabinoids, and there are terpenes. These are essential oils that give it its characteristic smell, but they've also got therapeutic actions as well. So again, it's this idea of synergy between the various active constituents in the plant. That's probably why it works. Cannabidiol cannot get you high. It is potentially intoxicating. But it's got all these actions: pain relieving, anti-nausea and vomiting, anti-epileptic for seizures, antipsychotic, anxiolytic, so helping relieve anxiety and depression, antioxidant, combating neurodegenerative diseases, and lots of other things. THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, it gets a bit of a bad name because that is the one component in cannabis that could potentially get you high. That idea of getting high is to do more with recreational use of cannabis, not the medicinal use. So, and it's dose dependent. So with low doses of THC, no, it's not going to have that kind of effect. Whereas with high doses of THC, yes, you can have effects on the mind for sure. And you've got to remember that the recreational market, they breed the cannabis plants to have high amounts of THC. So I'm really talking here about the medicinal use of it. And you can see that THC has got a lot of good properties too. It's analgesic, pain relieving. It's neuroprotective. It's an antioxidant. It helps, it's a bronchodilator. So that could potentially be useful with breathing conditions, anti-inflammatory, even anti-aging. So there's a mice study recently that was published that shows that it might have anti-aging properties as well. 10 times the anti-inflammatory power of aspirin. So, you know, this has got enormous potential, but different levels of evidence at the moment. Now, how does it work? We have to backtrack a little bit to understand that we make our own cannabinoids in our bodies. These are called endocannabinoids. And the reason they found this out was back in 1965, Raphael Mechoulam, a Israeli researcher, isolated the chemical constituent or chemical structure of tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. In the 90s, they went looking for the receptors in the body, and lo and behold, they found receptors all right. They called them cannabinoid 1 and 2, CB1 and CB2 receptors, but they also found we make our own cannabinoids. These are anandamide and another quite long name I'll just call 2AG. So our endocannabinoid system actually is responsible for homeostasis of nearly every system in our body. It's everywhere. So it modulates our immune system, inflammation, pain, our stress response, our emotions, our moods, our sleep, the development of the embryo, neuroplasticity, particularly in developing children and adolescents, but also right through our life, the cycle, life cycle of the cell, etc., etc. So it really is the most important neuroregulatory system of our body. It's got three main components, as I said, the receptors, our endogenous cannabinoids, and the enzymes. This really just says, where are these receptors? They're in the brain, all through the brain here, lots of different areas, but also all through the body. Fat tissue, gastrointestinal tract, liver, heart, our endocrine glands, our reproductive organs, our blood vessels, our skin, our immune cells. The CB2 receptors are in our immune system in particular, but they're also in lots of other areas of our body as well. So why is that important? THC mimics anandamide, our endocannabinoid, and it binds with the CB1 and CB2 receptors. CBD binds with other receptors in the body, and the terpenes also have their own receptors. There is a concept that many diseases are due to dysfunction or deficiency of the endocannabinoid system. So I think medicinal cannabis is going to be one of the most exciting forms of medicine going forward. And here's just some of the forms of medicinal cannabis. Mostly what we have in Australia here is oils for oral consumption. Here's some of the conditions that CBD can potentially treat. Again, a lot of this is animal research, but more and more is being done in humans as well. So you can see there's quite a laundry list there. Hemp seed, on the other hand, cannot get you high. It does not have the phytocannabinoids in them, but it's got lots of benefits for the nutraceutical and cosmeceutical industries. It's rich in essential fatty acids, has a great ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, and it has lots of vitamins, lots of minerals, and a lot of protein too. So it's a good functional food, and it may be useful in prevention and treatment of a lot of conditions underpinned by inflammation. And here's just some of the research: cardiovascular disease, hypertension, rheumatoid arthritis, skin disorders like psoriasis. So when I looked on the Swiss website, I was delighted to see that they've actually got lots of hemp seed products here, and they've actually started to combine them. So hemp seed and turmeric, hemp seed and green tea, which is great because I'm now going down to the chemist to buy those. Wonderful products. So I think medicinal cannabis and the hemp industries in Australia is going to be a very good growth area because of our international reputation as clean and green. We have interesting growing technologies now, which I'll tell you about in a moment. We've got integrative medicine clinics, and I think the other growth areas around educating healthcare practitioners and government workers, etc., and the public around this industry. So here's just one company, Pharma Proprietary Limited. It has innovative growing technology for not only medicinal cannabis, but herbs. So you can basically track the active constituent profile as the plant's growing. So it means that you can try and assure as much as possible you've got a stable product at the end of your growing. And Relief clinics, as I mentioned before, these are integrated medicine clinics, all sorts of So I'm going to conclude there, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague, John Easterling, who's going to talk to you in a bit more detail about what's happening in terms of this amazing plant, medicinal cannabis.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Kylie. I always enjoy to listen to you. I always learn so much, and I appreciate your leadership in this whole arena of education and really helping open people's awareness to what's going on in this space. Yeah, plant medicine. I love plant medicine. And we're talking about herbal medicine. What's herbs? Herbs are plants. So I look at it as plant medicine. So we really look at a bigger spectrum, like why are plants so special? What is our relationship with the plant kingdom? And without the plant kingdom, we'd all be dead in 10 days, you know, maybe less. So what is so special about plants, or what are plants giving us? Well, we know oxygen. And we're dependent on the plant kingdom for food. We always have been. We eat food, or we eat the animals that eat the food, that eat the plants. So food, medicine, it's always been used as a medicine from the beginning of time. And then fiber. We know all the things we can do with fiber. And of course, cannabis is like a star, a poster child for expressing in each one of those arenas. And I grew my first cannabis in 1970, and then I didn't grow cannabis for many, many years. But the last 7 years, I've been growing cannabis specifically as a plant medicine. When I look at cannabis, I think of plant medicine. There's a huge profile of beneficial compounds and chemistry there, as Kylie was pointing out, and there's many, many different kinds of cannabis. And before I got into cannabis, I was into plant medicine from the Amazon rainforest. For the last 34 years, I've been dealing with indigenous people in the Amazon and bringing back therapeutic compounds from plants and working with that in formulation and distribution. So we've seen extraordinary things happen with plants in the plant kingdom. As I transitioned that business, it gave me an opportunity to focus on cannabis, which I've done the last 7 years. Right now, I've got 23 different chemovars of cannabis growing, and that means strains. All cannabis is not the same. Each plant will have a variation of chemistry and compounds in it. You have to remember that it looks like the cannabis is kind of originated in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, India, Persia, in that part of the world. And because that's where we see the first recorded medicinal use. We actually have a recorded, written medicinal use of cannabis that goes back 3,000 years. So there's nothing new about cannabinoids and terpenes as therapeutic agents. And as people took that cannabis all over the world, because it was that important, they took it with them into South America, into Asia, and it's everywhere now. And as a cannabis plant grows, it produces these compounds in response to its own immediate environment. The terpenes, for example, are the flavor compounds. It's producing, as we know, cannabis smells different ways. Some will smell skunky, some smells like lavender, some smells very citrusy. And those are, of course, the essential oils that are in the cannabis, otherwise like terpenes, we call them. And the terpenes not only have a therapeutic effect, they also modulate how the cannabinoids, the THC, CBD, CBC, that Kylie was referring to earlier, how they modulate and express in our bodies. Now, the cannabis plant will produce these compounds for its own life purpose. The terpenes are the smell compounds it produces to attract pollinators, to repel predators. And so if you have cannabis growing in Colombia, it's going to be different expressions, different challenges in the environment. So it'll express different terpenes than its original plant from the Himalayas. Likewise, if it's grown in Thailand or Australia or here in California, over several generations, it will change its terpene profile. Like I say, the terpenes are therapeutic by themselves, but combined with the cannabinoids, we get some really, really special effects out of this. And as Kylie pointed out, Raphael Mechoulam discovered in the early 90s the endocannabinoid system. which I believe will be just as important in understanding as our immune system, the endocannabinoid system, which actually you can integrate the cannabinoids we take in to the endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system actually looks out over our entire physiology, our entire neurology. So it interfaces with everything we are and everything we're doing. We have cannabinoid receptor sites on practically every cell in our body. So when we integrate those cannabinoids, we get a pretty immediate effect. And especially, I think most people are cannabinoid deficient. So when they take that in, they'll see an effect that maybe they haven't seen before, which is why cannabis has an effect across such a broad spectrum of issues, you know, from Alzheimer's and dementia, Parkinson's, cancer, pain, seizures. You would not expect one plant to have that kind of multiplicity of benefit, but the one plant is actually a series of plants because each one will have different profiles of cannabinoids, different profiles of terpenes. Now, I like to combine these terpenes and these cannabinoids together because we have a lot of data on a variety of these cannabinoids. Some actually can slow down migration of cancer cells. That's important. Some actually help to create an apoptosis where you're programming. So you're reminding the cancer cell so that it can program itself to die. They've forgotten to die. They want to keep proliferating. So there's different cannabinoids and different terpenes that modulate this expression, which makes it such an exciting field and something that we're going to be really heavily into, I think, for the next couple of decades. So I love plant medicine. I love plants. I have a research grove here. I've got a farm up in Oregon, and I can do my own HPLC here at the ranch. And I'm telling you, it's just an exciting time. Even what I've been discovering even this season has been mind-blowing. So there's a lot of studies on cannabis, a lot of research. Some of the first questions you get from people is, oh, well, but there's no real research, when in actuality, there's hundreds of studies on cannabis, thousands and thousands of studies on herbal medicine, plant medicine as a whole. And so when you start looking at those studies, you can be very surprised at what you see of how efficacious this can be in so many cases, and how neuroprotective it is. And no one's ever died from cannabis. You actually cannot overdose on it. Because one of the places where you don't have the receptor sites is, you know, at the base of your skull there, and so which controls your breathing. So you're never just going to stop breathing doing cannabis as you may with opiates. So it's a safe plant. It has a multiplicity of uses, and we're just really getting into it. My focus is really, I'm very interested in things that can deal with cancer and with pain. And we look around the world. Hey, you don't have to look too far. You look around your own house and your own neighborhood, you're going to find plenty of people with cancer and pain. So these are things that the plant kingdom actually does quite a good job at addressing in many cases. And anecdotally, I can say I've seen really many times surprising and wonderful things happen. And you look at the research and you can see, you know, how efficacious this can be. So this is going to be a big growing area. It's already a growing area. And so cannabis is very important as a plant medicine, as an herbal medicine now. The other plants are as well. My specialty has been Amazonian plants. And when I look at cancer, for example, if we're just looking at that, there's several ways, you know, one would, or I in particular, and other people share this view, will go about looking at cancer. First of all, you've got an angiogenesis where the cancer tumor or cells are replicating. They're developing their own vascularity because they need more oxygen, they need more nutrition. And so they just develop this very high replication rate. and they're going out there and compromising everything to keep themselves alive and growing. So, and the plant kingdom has wonderful anti-angiogenesis compounds, like the graviola is full of this. It's a big tree, grows in the Amazon, and the leaf has a high concentration of these acetogens, and these acetogens have an affinity for fast-growing cells, i.e. cancer cells. So they will go out and they will surround that, and they'll begin to shut down that vascularity and shut down the ability of that cancer cell to draw in nutrition. So you begin to compromise that cell. And there's so many plants that have a wonderful ability, Unigato, Chancropiedra, to really kickstart the immune system, get the phagocytosis and macrophage activity up, which is what you want if you have a degenerative issue. But if you can compromise tumor cells and get the immune system up so they can recognize they may have gone to sleep a little bit and allowed this cancer cell to be growing, but you activate that immune cell, you compromise the tumor, and oftentimes you'll create some inflammatory response around that tumor when it's compromised, which helps to alert the immune system. So a lot of botanicals have the immune product to boost your immune system, which is important. And then if everything's working properly, then of course, these are going to be a lot of dead cells that need to go through the lymphatic drainage. You go through our lymph system, this big system we have for getting rid of cellular debris. And there's plants that are really good at stimulating that lymphatic drainage. So if you can get all of these going on, the plant kingdom offers a host of allies to help us do this. Just to give you a little bit of idea of how we see those things coming into play. With cannabinoids, there are over 100 cannabinoids. There's over 200 terpenes. And many of these cannabinoids, all of these cannabinoids, when they're growing live in the plant, when you cut a plant, even a plant that's really high in THC, then, and as Kylie said, that's the psychoactive component. But if you eat that plant, I mean, full of those rich trichomes just dripping with THC, you're not going to get high because the plant produces things in an acidic form. So it's THCA and all the cannabinoids, really, CBDA, CBCA, CBGA. So all these important cannabinoids are produced in an acidic form. And when you decarboxylate them or break this carbon chain on the outside with heat, then it becomes THC, and it does become psychoactive. So you can actually get the benefit of high THC, which I think is great for pain, but get in the THCA in the fresh variety, and you can avoid the psychoactivity. So I love working with all the acidic compounds. I do some cold extractions, so it's only acidic compounds, but then I do decarboxylate some, and because those are important too. And even the ones you get high from have very potent therapeutic effects. And so, you know, getting high from plant medicine, you know, as a side effect is a far cry from the whole variety of compromises you can get from alternative methods, so to speak. But is this a growing business? Yeah, the plant medicine in America, and I'm talking about just the herbal industry only, not vitamins and minerals and other supplements, but only the herbal business was $4.9 billion last year in America. Billion, that's US billion. Last year in America, it was up about 8.6%. So it's doubled over the past 10 years. Now, if you put medicinal cannabis into that category as well as a plant medicine, which I do, then that's another 5 billion. So you got about a $15 billion business in America in plant medicine now, and that continues to grow at close to double digits. And it's interesting because none of that's covered by any kind of insurance. So these are things that people are spending money out of pocket with, presumably because they're seeing a good result. This business, it's, like I say, $15 billion and growing at $100 million a month. And that's just in America. So I think that's going to really engage worldwide. Of course, you know, it's been in Australia a long time and is growing in Australia. But I think we're going to see a real explosion in this because a lot of people just simply aren't happy with the results that they're getting with their health, and that's why they're looking around and finding things that do work and really staying with that. So I think there's opportunities in this whole space, certainly in cannabis, certainly in other plant medicines, herbal medicines, and there's opportunities in research. I know there's some research going on now, and there's going to continue to be a variety of research studies looking at plant medicine and cancer. And I'm very excited to see that happening.
Thank you, John. That's terrific. And Kylie, also very comprehensive and thought-provoking discussion. So thank you very much to both of you. We now have around about 15 minutes when we would love to invite our participants to ask questions. And I'd ask Justin and also Jason if you would like to participate as well, to even have with our speakers. I know, Justin, you were asking a question earlier about the preventative health strategy for our federal government. Perhaps if you'd like to.
Yeah, thanks, Virginia. Love to kick off. Question, I guess, without notice to both of you, John and Kylie, but the federal government here has just gone into another round of consultations for the National Preventive Health Strategy. Mm-hmm. And that's very significantly supported and funded. It's a decade-long strategy looking at how and what should we do in what order to take the system from illness and treatment to prevention and education, and then look at what we need to do to look at people's illness and treatment after that. So a wellness system, not an illness system. I just wonder if there's any one thing that you'd like to put in there. If you had the magic wand, what's the one thing you would put forward into the consultation as probably the single most important thing from your point of view in preventive health strategy?
I think it's all about education. So it's public education and it is a practitioner education. So we've got a Western medical system which doesn't really give much airtime, I suppose, to nutritional environmental medicine. I think that probably needs to change. So ACNM's doing a great job by providing postgraduate sort of training. In America, for example, integrative medicine is a specialty of medicine where it's not here. So, but I think I'm all about self-care and empowering people with knowledge. So I don't think that it should be, knowledge about health should be kept by, a small group of practitioners or that sort of thing. I think knowledge is there for everyone. Everyone has the right to knowledge about health. So I think education is probably underpins health.
Mm-hmm. John?
Yeah, I would tie that together with the education and then the access. They get the education on 1,000 kinds of botanicals, but every time I go to Australia, I take a suitcase full of herbage with me because it's just not finding availability in Australia for the wide spectrum of supplements and herbal products that are available easily in America. So it's, and I had a product range I tried to get into to Australia, and it was very, very onerous and difficult. So I think providing access, and that would go also for cannabis. Cannabis here in California and most places in America. If you're 21 years old, you walk into a dispensary and there's some very knowledgeable people there to walk you through all the different varieties of product available, from flower to kief to hash to rosin and resin and to edibles, and gummies and bars and ice cream and popcorn and everything you can imagine. So providing education so people understand it. This is not that difficult to get your arms around. And second to that, having access to a much broader range of herbal products would be my hope. As an Australian, I'm a dual citizen for Australia.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Kylie.
That's great. I've just, yes, a couple of questions. Charles Kobes is actually typed his, and I think you both know Charles, who's involved with the Industrial Hemp Association. Yes, so Charles has asked, Kylie, can you please expand on what a Cochrane review is, in case people don't know, and what's been happening, if anything, to attack Cochrane reviews by perhaps Big Pharma.
Yeah.
And there's a second question about the definition of health, but I'll go back to that one.
Okay. So the Cochrane Library was set up years ago, and it is seen as, I guess, the gold standard in evidence in medicine. So what it does is it conducts systematic reviews and meta-analyses of the evidence that's published in the literature. So what it will do is it will take randomized controlled trial evidence, and it will basically have a set of criteria that a study will meet. If it meets that quality criteria, that study gets put into the systematic review. If it's a poor quality study, they say, no, not good enough, we're not going to include you. So they might look at, say, 200 studies and cull it down to maybe about 20 that meet their strict evidence, their quality criteria for a study, because not all studies are done equally. Some are poor methodologically. So they'll take the best studies, the data, that's called a meta-analysis. And they basically come up with, it's like a yes-no question. Is this efficacious for this condition? And they'll, as I said, look at the, they'll crunch the numbers, if you like, and they'll basically sort of come up with a yes-no response. So is it efficacious or not? Now, the Cochrane Library have been doing Cochrane reviews on many different conditions. So you can type in, let's say vitamin C, or you can type in the name of a herb, and you'll often find that they've actually done a review. So they're taking the best randomized controlled trials and saying, on the balance of this evidence, what do these say? Now, when you combine things in statistical terms, you're always going to start to introduce some flaws into it. So they're not perfect. There are, limitations from Cochrane reviews or systematic reviews that are inherent in using statistics, if you like. But interestingly enough, one of the fellows that helped set up the Cochrane Library, Peter Goetzer, he wrote a couple of books, and they're very good books to read. Deadly Medicines and Organised Crime was the first one, I think. Deadly Psychiatry and Organised Denial was the second one, and there was a third one on mammography, breast mammograms. Now, he basically looked at, I guess, what's happening within the pharmaceutical industry, and he was critical about, I guess, some of the drugs that can get onto the market and how they've got there. So that's the essence of his books. And he was, and I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, time seems to have just changed recently, but I think it was probably last year, where he was under attack himself. Now, Charles, I don't know the full details of that, but it's interesting that someone who helps sort of set up or found the Cochrane Library was under attack himself. I think they were trying to get him out of the institute. So I don't know whether you heard much more on that, John, or not, but yeah, that's probably all I know, Charles.
And Charles asked a second question also, just saying that most people don't have a definition of health. And what is your own definitions, each of you? How would you express that?
John, I'll let you go first.
All right. Yeah, I think we're just getting into a place to express our greatest manifestation of health, because we haven't had access to a lot of chemistry and nutrition and informational compounds that we're now able to ingest. But ultimately, I think if you're happy and if you're in pain, you're probably not happy. If you have a degenerative issue, you're probably not happy. But if you are in pain and you do have a degenerative issue and you're able to overcome that and understand that we're spirit beings and we're full of love and the universe is full of love, and to be happy, then you're there.
I guess when I think about health, and I don't think we define health well as a nation, and I think that's reflected, I guess, in our health outcomes at the moment. For me, it's got several different dimensions. So John, you kind of touched on some of those. It's got a spiritual dimension. I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about spirituality here. So there's a spiritual dimension to health that I think is very important. There's the emotional component. You know, we are not separate. And Chinese medicine has certainly taught me that, the interconnection between mind and body. But that's also there in Western science, psychoneuroimmunology, psychoneuroendocrinology. So it's the emotional dimension, the mental dimension, I guess, as well as the physical dimension. And we tend to preference the physical dimension, despite the fact that, I guess, the Ottawa Charter back in, I think, 1986 changed the definition of health to not be merely the absence of physical disease, but a state of complete mental, emotional and social well-being. I think it was words to that effect. But I don't think we've really put that into action very well. And I think that health needs to look on it as a spectrum. So again, we tend to look at ill health and disease. So we, you know, but really, have we really defined what optimal health is, and why are we accepting average health? And what is average health anyway? So I think we have to look at health as a spectrum, and it has to be multidimensional, because, you know, at the end of the day, like you said, John, you know, happiness, if you're happy, then you're by and large probably going to have a healthy immune system. If you're unhappy, guess what that does to your immune system? That's what stress does. You know, if you're not you're able to contact your friends, and we're all experiencing that at the moment, guess what happens? Your immune system doesn't work so well. So we are social beings, aren't we? You know, and yes, you bring it back, you know, to that sort of concept of love and happiness. They are all essential to health. Where is that in our health policy? I don't know.
And actually just focusing, this is a question from me, just focusing on the fact that we're all enclosed and we've all been probably eating a little more than we should have. I'm just, Kylie, you commented about the toxic chemicals that are stored in fat. When you go on a diet, are those toxic chemicals then released into your body? And if so, is that dangerous?
I can't really comment on that. No, I guess it's probably not as simple as that. And the problem with some of the chemicals that are actually stored in the body is that they can be stored for a very long time. So it's not as simple as, oh, you're sort of losing fat cells or fat, you know, that sort of thing. So no, I don't think I can answer that totally.
Okay. So, the other one, I think this is for Kylie as well. The TGA are considering rescheduling CBD. What's the likelihood of down scheduling or descheduling? Any thoughts?
Interesting. I have been very involved in this because I did put forward on behalf of a number of companies and not-for-profit organisations a submission in March to the TGA to remove CBD entirely from the schedules and regulate it as a complementary medicine, as other herbs are regulated. So we're talking about low THC, so 0.2% or less THC in products. And interestingly enough, the TGA then put in their own submission at the same time or a few weeks later, where they've put, as I said, a submission into their own committee essentially to remove CBD, and it's capped with dosage, I guess, from Schedule 4, which is a prescription-only medicine, to Schedule 3, which is a pharmacy-only medicine. To a kind of those two, what the outcome is going to be. They have to make a decision by the end of the year. I think the TGA do their best to regulate and keep things safe. So I guess we're just going to have to sort of wait for the outcome of that. But yeah, I guess, you know, we put forward a fairly strong argument why CBD, basically with low THC, should be regulated as a complementary medicine, simply because the risk of harm is relatively low. Yes, some drugs can high doses, and we know a lot of those drugs anyway. So a lot of the trials in epilepsy, for example, have been done in children with epilepsy, severe forms of it. They have been on 3 or 4 or 5 different drugs at the same time, as well as taking CBD in the clinical trials. And the doses of CBD are very large comparatively. So yes, we do know that, and that can be handled, I have argued, with correct labelling, because lots of herbal medicines potentially interact with lots of drugs as well, and we don't put them on the schedules of the national poisons list. So that's, I guess, a bit of the politics that's going on at the moment, and we'll just have to cross our fingers that a sensible decision is made.
All right. Justin, I wondered if you wanted to make any more comments, or Jason's son, if you wanted to mention.
I might actually ask a question. So I'm no stranger to TCM or traditional Chinese medicine or medicinal herb. With the Australian, with the Chinese heritage, my great-grandfather actually is a very famous herbalist in China. I think he's been passed down from the last dynasty of China. One of the doctors in the court actually taught his teacher. Anyway, I'm no stranger to that. And also, as the working Victorian government as head of engagement with China, and there's a lot of partnerships between TCM, between China and Australia. A lot of Chinese organizations want to establish collaboration. In the medicinal cannabis front, I was involved in the medicinal cannabis project in Victoria. As a person, however, trained as a pharmacist in Australia, I know there's a lot of skepticism in the mainstream pharmaceutical industry and also medical industry. So what, I guess in China or other countries, and maybe in Germany or other parts of Europe, where herbal medicine or traditional medicine is well accepted, but why is it so hard, do you believe, John and Kelly, it's so hard to be accepted in countries like Australia and the US? I'll give you one example. One of the example was, it is so difficult for complementary medicine to be reimbursed through Medicare. And recently, even Australia's health fund, like Medibank and Bupa, has removed some of the complementary medical treatment from the reimbursement list. So why do you think it's so hard for people to accept it in these Western countries, but not the others?
Look, I think you go, John. Talk about what happened in the states of demonisation, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah, in America, I think, we have a large, I think, over 50%, over half of the population in America has used marijuana. Over half the population is using vitamins, herbs, minerals on a regular basis. So, you don't have half the population, doing almost anything. So I think it's pretty well accepted here in America, and it's available as well. I mean, I know you're working, and I don't, make skepticism, but when you decide on these, it's hard to be skeptical about, the science and what you're seeing there. So we're knowing some things work. I'll give this example, and then you can draw your own conclusions from it. Okay, there's a couple of plants, Pedro Macau, Pata de Vaca, used in Brazil, very famous as blood sugar lowering plants. Okay, and they make a hot water infusion out of the leaves. That's it, right? Make a tea out of the leaves, and it brings the blood pressure down. So that attracted a lot of attention with some drug companies saying, hey, of course, this is a multi-billion-dollar diabetic potential here. And so they took the plant and they broke it down into 7 active components, right? The 7 active ingredients, and studied each one to see where is this activity coming from so that we can go through a process, get a patent, have a drug in the marketplace. And they were very disappointed because none of them worked. It had to be the leaves in a hot water infusion, because we know nature is carrying a lot of intelligence in how it releases chemicals, the complexity, the profiles of these. So those single isolate chemicals, and we're seeing the same thing in the cannabis industry with pure THC or pure CBD as an isolate, you're not getting the benefit and the safety factor that comes with using the full spectrum extract. So the drug company, even though they could see that this lowers blood sugar, well, they don't sell tea, they sell drugs. So they just bypassed it. So therefore, they didn't spend any energy, making that really well known. So I think the business model has not been suitable for that industry. So I think therefore is their skepticism. But as soon as they're able to isolate something, I promise you they will. But the good news is, to me, as a plant medicine guy, working with having a great respect for the plant kingdom and the full profile of what it's expressing, right down to the microbiology of the soil it's growing in and the relationships between, the bacteria in the soil and the bacteria in the plants, the communication that's going on there. Now we can register the chemical signaling that's happening there. And then again, that signaling outside as well. And we know how important the bacteria is. So I think, I would suggest to you that the bacteria in the soil and in the plants is communicating with the bacteria in our biome as well. I love to get in, not patients, let's say people who are doing some of the extracts that I make. I love to get them into the greenhouse to actually engage with the living plants and the full microbiology of what's going on there, because that's going to have to convert into their physiology later on. But to answer your question, I think that you would see people who can't figure out how to make a business or a commercial interest in this just continue to not be interested. So in America, with the size of the herbal industry, where there is a space for that in the regulatory framework under the FDA, with the Food and Drug Administration, then we're seeing, continue to see big investment and big growth and big acceptance in America.
It's terrific. Well, we've reached the end. I'm sorry, we're just about out of time, Kylie, so we can't get you to comment on that final question, but it's been enormously interesting. I hope our guests agree. It's been absolutely fascinating, and I think a lot of opportunities arise, and I know China's such a strong market. We've got a great potential up there. So with our expertise, product, services, and a bit of hard work, hopefully there'll be some good results. Thank you all very, very much for participating. John, for Zooming in, especially Kylie for that terrific presentation as well. Justin, for your terrific support, and Jason, son, as always, it's a great pleasure to work with you. To our guests, thank you very much for Zooming in. We will be sending you the audio from this, and we look forward to keeping in touch with you all and look forward to seeing you at an upcoming session. And I also thank our team behind the scenes, Zach and Maddie, who've been pushing buzzers and buttons and doing all sorts of wondrous things. So thank you all so very, very much. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy, and use the information we've discussed today to support you through this next COVID phase. So all the very best, and thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason, Kylie,
Bye.
John. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.